GCSE poetry, love and relationships, letters from Yorkshire, and poems to compare it to. Before we start, I just want to say a quick thank you to the physics and maths tutor for allowing me access to their annotated poem. For more resources, just click on the link below, it's all free. In February, digging his garden, planting potatoes, he saw the first lapwings return and came indoors to write to me, his knuckles singing, as they reddened in the warmth. It's not romance, simply how things are. You out there, in the cold, seeing the seasons turning, me with my heart full of headlines feeding words onto a blank screen. Is your life more real because you dig and sow? You wouldn't say so, breaking ice on a water butt, clearing a path through snow. Still, it's you who sends me word of that other world, pouring air and light into an envelope, so that at night, watching the same news in different houses, our souls tap out messages across the icy mills. So, the poet here, Maura Dooley, has created a poem about a more friendly relationship rather than romance, and we can see here that they are very segregated but close at the same time. The poem begins in a sort of active way where she's talking about this other person digging in the garden, planting potatoes, very actively describing. And this sort of contrasts to how she's more passively feeding words onto a blank screen. But by presenting them in both a positive way, it's showing how they're just getting the positive out of both situations. There's also a matter-of-factly tone in the line, it's not romance, simply how things are. And it is representative of how the speaker has had a role in news presentation. You out there in the cold. Now, the monosyllabic words used suggest that he lives an uncomplicated life, which juxtapose the polysyllabic seeing the seasons, which further shows the disconnect between the two. Heart full of headlines is a really good example of alliteration, which is used to emphasise that although the speaker loves a character, she also loves their separate lives and appreciates them. Make sure you take note of this slide. You wouldn't say so, breaking ice on a water butt. So now there's this illusion of being cold from ice, snow. However, it's still presented in a very positive way. So it's showing how they're making the best of the situation again. Pouring air and light into an envelope has to be the best metaphor in this poem. It shows the joy they receive from writing letters to each other. The connection doesn't have to be physical for them to be so happy. The image created of pouring air and light into an envelope suggests that the speaker feels trapped in her urban life. Maura ends the poem in, our souls tap out messages across the icy mills. Now, this is quite a beautiful metaphor, which shows how they're not letting themselves become disconnect due to the physical distance that separates them. Icy mills would usually act as pathetic fallacy to denote something negative. However, Dooley has not allowed it to do so here, which links back to how there is seasonal change, but their relationship stays together. So let's look at some poet context. So the poet is called Maura Dooley, as we talked about. She was born in 1957 to present, and Dooley has lived in multiple places throughout her life. She was born in Cornwall, but has lived in London, Bristol and Yorkshire. That may explain the difference in locations. The disparity between urban and rural life is reflected in the poem, and many of her other poems have the same theme of communication. Let's look at structure and form essay points. So firstly, the first 4 stanzas are centred on the speaker and the father's separate lives. Now we assume it's father, but it could be anyone. The tone changes in the last stanza, as they are no longer described separately, but together. This creates the sense of them coming together and a sort of conclusion to this end. 2. Each stanza is 3 lines long, written in tercets, which depicts the brief nature of their correspondence. 3. Most of the lines use 5 stresses along enjambment. The enjambment works to tie the poem together, making up for the lack of rhyme scheme. There's also use of asyndetic listing. Digging in his garden, planting potatoes, he saw the first lapwings return. It gives a detailed insight into the man's life from the outset of the poem to depict the closeness that they have. In terms of language essay points, there's use of metaphors, which creates a joyful tone in the poem. Visual imagery is also used. Weather is also reflected, and there's also pathetic fallacy. And the theme of communication is quite prevalent in the poem. And it talks about how she likes feeding words into a blank screen. The conclusion shows how she benefits from human communication and connection through the antithetical statement, same news in different houses. Make sure you take note of this slide. Finally, poems to compare it to. So I've given you two here. Firstly, Winter Swans, and then Mother Any Distance. So comparing Winter Swans with Letters from Yorkshire, they both explore the effects of disruption and separation, and they both share natural imagery to create a vivid setting. However, in Letters from Yorkshire, the characters are physically separated, whereas Winter Swans is just emotional detachment. And in Letters from Yorkshire, they deal with familial relationships, whereas Winter Swans concerns a romantic or sexual relationship. Comparing Letters from Yorkshire and Mother Any Distance, both poems, the characters employ unconventional means in order to maintain a healthy relationship. But in Mother Any Distance, the speaker describes that they reach towards a hatch that opens on an endless sky, which shows how their mother now allows more freedom. So there's more of a conclusion. In terms of differences, Letters from Yorkshire duly presents a gap closing between two people through visual imagery, pouring air and light into an envelope. However, in Mother Any Distance, Armitage depicts two people growing further apart through the extended metaphor of a tape measure. Now, I think that's a really unique point, so I would definitely recommend using that in your essays. But anyway, for more videos on GCSE English, French, Geography and Computer Science, subscribe to Know All from GCSE, and thank you for watching.